Welcome to part two of the restoration of this lovely three-drawer dresser. Now, if you just came across this video and have not seen part one, you can just go to my channel and check it out. But I also put a link to part one in the description. This is the largest piece of furniture that I have ever done a full restoration on. And I'm trying to do the best job I possibly can. And while it's definitely labor intensive, I still see all the potential beauty in this piece and know that once done, it will be a beautiful addition to my client's home. One of the most compelling reasons for me to refinish furniture is seeing it transform in front of me. Yes, it is messy and at times it's tedious, but when I can look back at the before and after pictures, there is such a tremendous sense of satisfaction and so much joy in revealing the beauty in an old neglected piece that might otherwise end up in a burn pile or a landfill. At the end of part one of this video, I had the base of the dresser and all three drawers completely stripped down to bare wood, and this is where I'm picking up again. So let's get back to work. I've been ignoring the frame to the mirror this entire time. The poor thing has just been sitting neglected, propped up against a shelf in my messy garage. But now its time has come. It has some chipped pieces of trim, and I see more hand sanding in my future. Most notably, it is missing all the veneer from the front trim board that holds the mirror in place. But luckily, I have some walnut veneer left over from another job, so I'll be using that veneer here. I scraped the old finish off the flat portions on the sides using my carbide scraper. I used multi-strip chemical stripper on all the intricate places that would be harder to sand. For the thankfully flat sides, I used my orbital sander and a 120 grit sandpaper. Time to address that missing veneer. I made a template for the veneer using painter's tape. I made sure to burnish the tape to the trim piece thoroughly before I cut away the excess tape carefully using an X-Acto knife. I have some lovely veneer I had ordered for a previous project that unfortunately arrived broken, but it will be just the ticket for this piece. The veneer wasn't long enough to cover the entire trim board, so rather than have a seam right in the center, I opted to cut my template into three pieces, putting the two seams in less conspicuous spots than one seam in dead center. I removed the tape templates and applied contact cement to the backs of the veneer pieces, as well as the trim board. I let that sit for 15 or 20 minutes for the contact cement to get tacky and carefully added the veneer pieces. You really have one shot at this because once those two touch, they are stuck, well, like glue. I burnished the pieces down and then sanded the edges smooth. I added wood filler to the seams and then sanded that smooth. Next, I worked my way around the mirror frame, hand sanding all the places that couldn't be done using an electric sander. I also glued and clamped any broken or lifting trim. There are plenty of chipped and broken places on those wood appliques. And typically, when I have a repair like this to do, I make a mold of another place on the same piece that's intact. I fill that mold with Bondo and sand it smooth. I found that the hot glue hack to make the molds, while effective, is really, really hard to remove. And I had seen another flipper use this It's called Amazing Mold Putty. So I ordered some off Amazon, and I have to say, it is amazing. It works great. Was easy to mix, easy to mold, easy to remove the molds. I mixed it up and added the mold putty to all the unbroken trim pieces that matched the broken ones. When I removed my first mold, I was so impressed with how well it came off and how perfectly detailed it was. I even gave it a big thumbs up. If you're a really smart person, which clearly I am not, you already figured out what did not occur to me until I filled my first mold with Bondo and went to apply it. The intact pieces were mirror images of the ones that were broken, so they were facing the opposite direction. I could not use a single one of those molds. But that's okay. I am the queen of this didn't work. Let's try it another way. So, new plan. I mixed up quick wood, molded into the shape the best I could, and sanded all that into shape. Labor intensive, but ultimately effective. I had noticed that the holes on the back of the dresser where the brackets for the mirror attached were pretty wallowed out. And I really wanted to make sure that the brackets will be secure when we go to reattach it to the dresser base. So, using toothpicks and wood glue, I inserted as many toothpicks as I could into each hole, then drove them in deeper using a mallet. I let this dry overnight, then cut the toothpicks flush using a small hand saw. Now those holes can be re-drilled for the correct size, and this will keep the mirror securely in place. I spent the rest of the day doing a super thorough hand sanding, using a 220 grit sanding pad, going back over the whole piece to ensure that everything was sanded smooth and ready for stain, then blew it off using my air compressor. Next stop is stain, but for now, everything gets pushed back into the garage for the night. Today is stain day, my favorite part of refinishing furniture. I love watching the stain bring wood grain back to life, but before I stain, I want to make sure that there are no swirl marks or scratches that I missed, and I want to thoroughly clean the entire piece of any sanding dust or residue that could possibly interfere with my new finish. So I wiped everything down with mineral spirits. Most times I just use a damp microfiber cloth for this step, but since everything is being restained, I want to get one last look for any potential problems before I start staining. I also used my little acrylic bristle brush to get any sawdust in the crevices of all those intricate little places where it could possibly have accumulated. I started with the mirror, then moved to the drawers, and finished up with the dresser body. It all looks really good, and I am so excited about applying the stain. While the mineral spirits were drying, I turned my attention to the drawer hardware I had removed and set aside at the beginning. I made my hardware soup. It's the pulls, knobs, and screws, white vinegar, and water. I put it on the stove and let it come to a boil. Once it boiled, I turned off the heat and let it cool. I removed the hardware and scrubbed all the pulls down using a scrubby pad and Barkeeper's Friend. It's clean, but as you can see, it is not brass and all the gold plating is gone, so it's not attractive as is. So I coated it with some antique gold rub and buff. Rub and Buff is a wax-based finish and generally does not require a top coat. However, since this is going on a high-touch area like a drawer, I sprayed it with a clear top coat. However, I still did not like how they looked. The plain gold is just pretty meh. So after the top coat dried, I applied some black wax using a wax brush and wiped it back with a rag. The wax stays down in the details, really bringing them out, and it just looks so much better. I repeated this process for each piece of the hardware and see how much better it looks. Then I applied another coat of the Rust-Oleum Clear Spray Enamel just to seal all the wax in. The screws were all still pretty rusty, so I brushed them all down using a wire brush to remove all that rust, and much better. These will all be set aside and put back on the dresser later. Here are all the products I will be using for the new finish for this dresser. Varathane's Pre-Stain Wood Conditioner, Minwax Oil-Based Stain in the color Dark Walnut, and Minwax Wipe-On Poly in a warm satin finish. I have everything I need, but I have one more step before I can begin staining, and that, of course, is applying the pre-stain conditioner. It really helps to prevent the stain from going on splotchy or unevenly and gives you a more smooth and consistent finish. Oil-based stain is pretty much my go-to, so I really like this Varathane wood conditioner, which is formulated to be used alongside oil-based stains. It's pretty strong smelling, I'm not going to lie, so use it either outside like me or at least in a well-ventilated area. I apply it using a chip brush, brushing across the grain, and then wipe back the excess with the grain. It has to set for about 30 minutes before you begin staining. So I applied it to the mirror frame first. Then while that was sitting, I applied it to one of the 3 drawers. After that, I would apply the conditioner to a piece and it would set for the 30 minutes while I was staining the previous piece. I just went back and forth until I had everything conditioned and stained. I begin the staining with the drawers, and whenever I stain drawers, I have this thing that I like to do. I use a small artist brush to apply stain to the dovetails. I think it looks nice and just has a more finished and a neat look to it. I also use that brush to help get the stain down into the grooves on the drawer fronts and to all the wood appliques. I'm looking at that raised panel on the top with the burled walnut. I think it's black walnut. I noticed this when I stripped it down, that you can really see that it has a distinct line where one side is darker than the other. I'm thinking that one side is the heartwood and the other is sapwood. Walnut heartwood is typically darker brown, while the sapwood is more light colored like a yellowish tan. I stained both sides, but I plan to use toner to even out the 2 sides. I'm pretty stoked with how beautifully this is accepting the stain, and I'm loving the dark walnut color. Staining is so satisfying and rewarding. Let's just enjoy watching the process. Well, now staining day is done, and I want to let everything dry overnight. I've rolled everything back into my garage, and I'm just shutting it down for the night. Tomorrow, color matching. Today, I will be color matching all those wood filler repairs. But first, I start by adding 1 coat of top coat. You have to add that first prior to doing any color corrections because that top coat is going to affect the color of your wood. I added a thin coat of it to the dresser base, to the drawers, and to the mirror frame. I let that dry and just got started. This is always a challenge. I have all kinds of markers and blend all sticks for color matching, but my favorite tool and the one I have the most success with is my Seisso Repair Kit. It has all these little tubes of paint in varying shades of brown, orange, gray, etc. Sometimes I use them straight, or I do a custom blend of several shades to get the closest match to the piece I'm working on. I just paint it on using a small craft brush. Sometimes I'll use a marker or one of my blend all sticks to add a wood grain appearance. I don't ever use gloves when I do this because I use my fingers to blend. I started with the top drawer, and you can clearly see the drawers had quite a bit of broken and chipped veneer, and you can see where I used wood filler on it and it sanded smooth. My mission, and I choose to accept it, is to disguise all those repairs. I just worked my way down, blending and working on it in layers until I'm happy with the results. Afterwards, I sprayed the entire drawer with toner, and you cannot argue with the results. Unless you know where the repairs are, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find them. Everywhere there was a repair, I color matched those repairs to make them disappear. I worked my way around each piece and then sprayed them with toner to even out the different woods and help disguise those repairs. After all this, now seems like a good time to call it quits and pull everything into the garage for the night. Tomorrow will be final top coat day. The piece already has 1 coat of top coat on it, so I started out by lightly sanding everything using a 240 grit sanding sponge just to knock down any dust nibs and create a smooth, even surface for the next coat. I wiped back all the sanding dust using a damp microfiber cloth and then applied my poly to everything. For the dresser top, I take extra care to make the surface as durable and as smooth as possible. After the initial top coat, I misted the surface with water and sanded in the direction of the grain only, wiped it all back, and then applied the next coat. I moved up in grit for each coat. I used this little hand sanding tool, and then starting with a 400 grit, and then I went to 800 to 1500 to 3,000 to 5,000. And then finally, I did 3 coats of 10,000 just using a white finishing pad after the final coat. I mean, this is a lot, I know, but in the end, so worth taking the time because this dresser is smooth as glass. I gave all 3 drawers a final wipe down with a damp cloth and then lined the drawers with this beautiful contact paper with a damask pattern on it. I did sand the inside of all the drawers clean. It's just something I like to do, and I think it adds a classy, finished look to the drawers. I cut the paper just a little oversized. I add it to the drawer, always starting in the middle. It's not easy because these, particularly the bottom 2 drawers, are so huge. But once I get the paper down, I smooth it down and burnish it well using a plastic Bondo spreader. And then I trim the edges off using an X-Acto knife. I decided to put the hardware back on the drawers and just kind of see how everything was looking. I put the drawers back in and I wasn't completely happy, but when I moved it into the sun to get a better look, I was downright miserable. I hate the bottom 2 drawers. If you look at the middle drawer, you can clearly see where I sprayed the toner, and it looks very muddy and uneven. Plus, the raised panels, you can still see that line where the burled walnut veneer goes from one color to another. I thought I could use the toner to even it out across the panel, but it just looks horrible, and I can't with this. I can't return this beautiful antique dresser that holds so much meaning to a very sweet client. I can't return it to her in this condition and then charge her money for it. Nope, not happening. So I immediately pulled out the bottom drawer and scrubbed the whole thing down with acetone to remove that finish and then sanded it back. Then I went back and got the middle drawer and did the same thing, starting over. It happens. Well, not to everyone, but to me. It happens to me a lot. So here's the thing. I was so frustrated and so bummed out that I didn't record redoing these 2 drawers. I didn't record removing the finish gone wrong or sanding it back or the restaining or redoing all those color corrections. I didn't hit record again until I was redoing the final top coat. But the right thing to do isn't always the easiest thing to do. And truthfully, after I had removed that finish, I felt very relieved. Originally, I was just not happy, and I wished that I had made different choices. I wished I had not used stain on the drawer fronts where the diagonal veneer was. They were plenty dark with just a top coat. The stain made them too dark and really obscured the grain pattern. I wished I had only stained the wood overlays and the raised panel. I wished I had only used stain on the sapwood side of the raised panel instead of both sides. I wished I had not used a spray toner on those 2 drawers, but used a gel stain between coats to tone the sapwood side and even it out with the heartwood side of the panel. I wished all those things. So I made my own wish come true, and removing that finish again gave me the opportunity to make all those things right and to make those better choices. I noticed that on the bottom drawer, there are quite a few cracks here. So I used a wax filler stick and a soldering iron, melting the stick and wiping the melted wax into all the cracks. It dries pretty quickly, and I scraped off the excess wax with a plastic scraper and then buffed the repair smooth with my finishing pad. Better. I think the middle drawer was maybe feeling left out, so it started being dramatic. The joints on it were noticeably looser than the other two drawers, and with all the washing, sanding, moving it around, it was just getting worse and worse. So it got disassembled, re-glued, and put back together, and then clamped with a band clamp while it dried. So all three drawers are ready and waiting. I'm just letting that glue dry. In the meantime, we'll be adding these adjustable furniture levelers to the feet instead of casters. My husband removed the old inserts for the casters and then drove in these new inserts for the levelers to go into. I added these tack-in drawer glides to reduce the wear on the drawers. And then I added wax to all the drawer glides. It's all coming together now. So I again recruited my husband to help me get everything put back together. He got the mirror ready to be attached to the base because I had plugged all the original screw holes. So now the holes have to be re-drilled, but they'll be much more secure than the old ones that were all wallowed out from years of use. We're rounding third base and headed for the home plate. We carefully reattach the mirror to the dresser base. I reattached the hardware to the drawers and gave all three drawers a wipe down with some Howard's feed and wax. It reconditions the wood and leaves a nice citrusy smell. Finally, I can put the drawers in, and this piece is done. I am absolutely over the moon with how this dresser turned out. It is positively exquisite, and I gotta say, I'm a little jealous of my client that gets to have this in her home. Of all the pieces of furniture I've refinished over the years, this is far and away the most beautiful piece I've ever worked on. It's been a frustration, a joy, a challenge, but such an honor to have someone entrust a piece of their family history to me. Furniture fills our home with function, places to sit, gather, rest, store our belongings, and live our daily lives. Over time, wear and age can dull both beauty and function. But family heirloom pieces such as this one carry something deeper than purpose. They hold stories. They remind us that what we restore isn't just furniture, but the memories and legacy that make a house a home.